Nonfiction. This is a weekly nonfiction podcast where each week I, Christian Yates, invite two guest hosts to come and talk about a topic that I have chosen at random. Our topic this week is the 80s. That's right, I forgot what we were doing for a second.
Yep.
The 80s.
We're doing the 80s.
And my guest hosts are Andy Mattingly and Patrick Taylor.
It's me.
So I chose. I don't know if you guys.
What'd you talk about in the 80s?
What?
What did you talk about in the 80s? Like, what part of the 80s did you pick?
1987.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You did 1987.
So yes. So have you guys ever heard of the Max Headroom incident?
No.
No.
Okay.
Actually, I have not.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So, have you ever heard of Max Headroom?
Max.
I do not
Headley?
recall.
Yeah, I know, right? As somebody who was not a teenager in the 1980s, I had no idea.
Or even alive.
Yeah.
Here's the
Right.
here's the other thing though. I did watch a lot of I Love the Insert Decade Here from like MTV,
Sure,
like
yeah,
when
yeah,
I was a
True.
kid. So I might have heard about this, but honestly,
Would that have been on?
what's his last name again?
It might have been Max Headroom.
Headley?
It's a character.
Oh, okay. Max Headroom.
That Matt Frewer played. So it started out right. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Max Headroom first, just because I didn't know what the fuck he was, and maybe some of the listeners don't know who the fuck he was. So Max Headroom, he was a character from a TV movie that originally aired on Channel 4 in the UK in 1985. The movie was called, and this is a terrible title for a film, Max Headroom, 20 Minutes into the Future.
So
Yeah.
That's about how far I can think
Right-
at any
right.
given moment.
20 minutes into the future.
that's as far as he can jump, or
That's as far into the future as he can go, I guess. I don't know.
No.
Did you watch
Wait,
the
is he like a
video?
fake psychic?
I did not watch. No, so he was like a reporter or something, and like hits his head and is able to see 20 minutes into the future.
classic?
A
But
fake
like
psychic.
he but like hits his head and then like dies, but then is replaced with an artificial intelligence version of
Max Headroom.
Max Head. Well, that's not even the name of the reporter. He doesn't remember.
Oh.
Because he hit his head. So they call him Max Headroom because he hit his head on a sign that said Max Headroom 6 feet or whatever, right?
That's so dumb.
It's stupid as fuck.
What's your name? P. Tier Griffin. Peter Griffin.
What?
That's from an episode of Family
Is
Guy.
that really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's trying to make up a name. Somebody's like approaching him. He's like, "What's your name?" And he's looking around, and somebody's like eating pea soup. He goes, "Pea," and somebody's crying, "Tier," and then just a griffin flies by. He goes, "Griffin, Peter Griffin."
Should I watch that show?
No.
No.
Oh, okay.
It's
I
Unless
thought-
you want to hear jokes just strictly against who is that? Mila Kunis, because
Yeah.
Seth MacFarlane hated Mila Kunis for about a season
Oh.
Yeah.
and just railed
does she
into her for
play-
24
She
episodes.
plays Meg.
Meg, I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
24 episodes.
Yeah.
Just
railing on Meg.
Raylan Mila Kunis for 24 episodes. Should
that I
I
would
not
watch.
watch
Oh,
this?
damn.
Because hold on.
damn, hang on. Maybe he was trying to make that joke all along.
Right?
That's
Railing
actually
Mila Kunis. Anyway, so Max Headroom, apparently this movie was so successful for some
What?
reason, right?
Because it was the 80s.
It was the 80s.
The
They were like, what
1980s.
else do we have going on? Plus, it was on the BBC, so it's like, like, what else did they have? They had this in Doctor Who, so that was it.
they
They
had
Doctor
other
Who.
they had other television shows.
I'm
I don't
sure
know
they
the
didn't.
80s.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
oh,
80s
oh, yeah,
totally
that
had
is
Doctor
true. Yeah,
Who.
no. I think at this point the show had gone on like an indefinite hiatus.
No, it was in the 90s when it happened because it was literally
Mike's
They
looking
made
it
the
up.
movie in
the
'96.
movie. Yeah, that was the one that was on. The
I don't
80s was like the heyday of 4.
When did Christopher Eccleston?
2005.
Wow, that was a long time.
Yeah.
Mike's looking it up.
Mike's gonna look it up. We'll find out in a minute. So anyway, so Matt Frewer plays this character. The movie became apparently so successful.
What's his name again, though?
Max Headroom.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I just wanted.
So The character was so successful it spun off into a music video program called The Max Headroom Show.
What?
So he was then a host of like MTV's The Max Headroom Show.
So did he just like start the program and he
Yeah.
was like, I foresee that fucking
guess.
Cher is going to be on today.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I guess.
Only 20 minutes of music, because then they'd have
Right.
commercials.
Right,
But
exactly,
it was
yeah.
billed as
20
the
minutes.
first music video program with an AI host. Even though
It's a
it was a dude playing
Just,
an AI.
that's just imagine the Pikachu meme, and that's my expression right now.
Right. That show ran from 1985.
that could be real now.
That show ran
is
for
basically.
2
It is?
years.
It is real now?
Basically, The Fly was for a very long time. It was automated. It was just a mix that was
What's The
constantly
Fly?
doing 929.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
the radio station. I thought you meant like TRL with a robot. That's what I'm picturing right now.
Oh, well, I mean, it wouldn't be like that now.
No.
Well, no.
It's
I mean,
not the
you could.
80s anymore.
No, we don't want to be robots anymore, weirdly enough.
Because
So
they look like us.
this music
we went the
video
wrong way.
program ran for 2 years.
Really?
2 years.
I'm into it.
The doctor who played Doctor Who in '87 was the one that got canceled.
Oh, okay. So
Canceled
it got
in
canceled in
87.
87.
In '89.
In 89.
In 89, it got canceled.
Who was the doctor? in
Okay, so
87.
Doctor Who ran
More
until
recently
89.
got canceled.
Yeah, he
Uh,
was not very good.
It was Doctor Number 4's son, and he just was not as popular.
Oh,
Okay.
that's true. I forgot. What was his name? Baker or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Colin
Yeah.
Baker was
Yeah.
the one that got
Baker's.
canceled.
Uh,
Tom Baker was the one.
Tom Baker was
Was
the dad.
4,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it was 4.
Tom Baker was the one everyone loved.
Right,
So,
yeah.
so after the music video show got canceled in 87, the Max Headroom drama series started in 1987, and that started airing on ABC, so it finally came over to the States. Yes, March of 87, this show starts airing. And in
No, I'm just thinking about ABC as a company. Sorry.
right, yeah, they make some interesting decisions.
Lazy fucking
And on November 22nd, 1987, so we just passed the fucking, 31st anniversary of this event. November 22nd, 1987, Chicago independent TV station WGN was airing its live telecast of the 9 o'clock news. Sports anchor Dan Roan was delivering highlights from the Bears-Lions game from earlier that afternoon when the signal was interrupted. The screen went black for 15 seconds and then returned to a man wearing a Max Headroom mask. The man said nothing, but bobbed back and forth while a sheet of corrugated cardboard was moved behind
know
him
about this.
to emulate the digital effect used frequently in Max Headroom programs. Yes? You seem like you have a question.
Did you not do this story already?
No.
I think I've heard about this though. This is like the first time that a major news was like hijacked, right?
Because then it left and he came back for a second?
Yeah. Okay, so you guys do know the story.
So possibly I just
Yeah.
didn't realize Max Headroom was.
Was
Yeah.
a thing,
The
yeah.
thing, yeah.
Well, you've definitely shown me these videos before. I guess I
Possibly.
just thought that we'd already talked about
I've
it
been
on
wanting
here,
to do this story for a long
But
time.
okay, so maybe we've just talked about
That's
it.
why we're talking about the 80s.
So yeah,
Yeah,
so
the
that
1980s.
that bit only lasted about 15 seconds. The only audio during this signal intrusion was a loud buzzing noise. Or I'm sorry, so the signal hijack in total lasted 25 seconds before it was stopped by WGN engineers when they switched their signal frequency to a different transmitter. After the signal interruption was corrected, Dan Roan said, "Well, if you're wondering what happened, so am I." So, right.
That's the greatest way
yeah,
to cover
he's
for
like,
that.
I don't know what the fuck that was.
Well,
but,
I'm not going to try, nor do I need to try and put any explanation on that.
right.
Let's
so
continue
anyway, the
with
Bears
the news.
versus the Lions. Let's get back to that.
Right.
So anyway, so 25 seconds that lasted. I don't know if you guys have seen the videos then, because if you look on YouTube, you can find the videos of this particular signal intrusion. The first few times I watched it, it was fucking terrifying. But like, the more times I've watched it, the fucking funnier it gets. So later that evening, on Chicago's WTTW, a second signal intrusion occurred during an episode of Doctor Who. We brought it back. This intrusion lasted 90 seconds, and unlike the first, featured audio. So I'm not going to play the video right now, only because the audio is very poor, but I did transcribe it. So I'm going to read you what the man in the Max Headroom mask.
Max Headroom, the voice of Max Headroom.
Right. And they did use like a voice modulator on the whole thing. And then so it's like it sounds horrible, and it's very difficult to determine what he's actually saying. But anyway, so the guy in the Max Headroom mask appears again on screen. The cardboard in the background is oscillating to simulate the digital effect, and he says, "That does it. He's a frickin' nerd." And then he giggles. He says, "Yeah, I think I'm better than Chuck Swirsky," who is the WGN sports announcer for the Chicago Bulls. Frickin' liberal. And then he's moaning. He says, "Oh, Jesus," and he's moaning and laughing. And then he holds up a Pepsi can and says, "Catch the wave," which was New Coke's advertising slogan, not Pepsi. He tosses the can away and then flips off the camera with a rubber finger extension, retrieves the Pepsi can, and starts singing "Your Love is Fading" from the 1966 single "I Know I'm Losing You" by The Temptations. So he's just breaking all kinds of copyright law.
I mean, he is intruding onto Doctor Who. So.
Right, it is true. Yeah. Then he throws the rubber finger extension and starts humming the theme song from Clutch Cargo. He says, "I still see the X," which is often misheard as "I stole CBS," but is likely a reference to Clutch Cargo's final episode.
I sold the X. I sold CBS.
I stole CBS, or I still see the X.
I sold CBS.
That's where people mishear things.
He sold CBS.
He says, "Oh, my piles," which is often misheard as "my files," though this could have been a deliberate pun as a computer pun. I don't know why or how.
I want to find this.
I don't know enough about computers.
Questions.
Right? Yeah. And then he says, "Oh, I made a giant masterpiece for all the greatest world newspaper nerds." WGN is referred to as world's greatest newspaper. That's what their call sign means. And then, let me see here. My brother, he's holding up a glove. He says, my brother is wearing the other one, but it's dirty. This one's got blood stains on it."
Is that a reference to OJ?
Maybe.
When was the OJ trial?
That was much later, I feel like. I don't really remember. We'll have Michael look that up, too. Mike's our designated Googler. So
many jobs.
Then the picture then cuts.
So underpaid.
Originally, it was said that this was done live, but it's not possible to have done it live. They had to have pre-recorded this and then
inserted the video into the stream.
That was in 94. The
Womp
trial.
womp.
And the reason that it can't be live, it had to be pre-recorded and then broadcast, is because the picture then cuts to the man bent over the chair that he had been sitting on, buttocks exposed, and the mask is being held up, still obscuring the man's face. The rubber extension is in the mouth of the mask, and a woman in a French-made outfit stands partially in frame holding a fly swatter. And he says, "They're coming to get me." Then the maid says, "Bend over, bitch," and starts smacking his ass with the fly swatter. And then he's screaming and he's saying, "Oh, do it," and moaning, and that's where the signal ends. Yeah.
I don't have anything.
Yeah, no. It's too ridiculous to make jokes about.
It's not even that. It's that's some revolution stuff right there.
Yeah.
Some conspiracy stuff. To make any comments on it is just hearsay.
So this interruption ran its full duration. It was not stopped. That was just
How
the
much did
end.
that cost them?
So
How do you mean, like to?
The money? No. How much
Like
money did it cost
viewers and
the
stuff?
CBS and stuff? That's where he was on ABC.
He interrupted.
no, ABC was
sorry,
the thing
WTTV.
for Max Headroom.
It's like a PBS channel.
Oh, okay. So I was gonna
like
say, because he was
local.
doing all that, like copyright stuff and like
yeah.
cursing and like showing his ass.
Mhm.
I mean, that cost them money.
Oh, I would imagine.
Like through the FCC,
for
right?
Sure.
I was just wondering if
They
you
would
knew
have
that.
to. Yeah.
I didn't know if you looked that up or not.
I did not.
Mike.
I looked up. Although since it was hijacked, it might not have cost them anything. If they had planned for it, then
You'd have to go back to seeing the reel to see if somebody spliced into it, because then that's when you have to know.
yeah.
At that point, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know how
So,
television works.
because they would be able to prove that the signal had been hijacked by a third party.
Yeah, I guess I feel like the assumption would be that they would have to have like enough control over their shit to not let stuff like that happen.
That's fair.
I feel like they would still be responsible.
From what I read, they did not receive a fine.
Okay.
So this interruption wasn't stopped though by like engineers. So this
they
one
were like, let's see what
ran
happens.
its full duration due to the fact that there were no engineers on duty at the
Oh.
Sears Tower where WTTW maintains its transmitter.
So what you're saying is people were lazy.
Yes.
Not
Either
doing
that
so.
or they had budget cuts and they were like, we can't afford to have somebody on
That's fair.
duty at 11 o'clock at night. So,
All right, so the network itself did not receive a fine, but, and this is especially funny to me since the perpetrators are never caught, the perpetrators, should they be caught, face up to a $10,000 fine and or a year in prison.
yeah.
So we're gonna catch you when we do.
We're going to get 10 grand out of you.
$10,000.
Well, you know, I
I
mean,
thought it was
what's
gonna be
that
way
in
more.
today's
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
account for inflation, maybe. So
That's true, because that's not a lot of money. I feel like
Was it 87?
when people like
Yeah.
say fuck accidentally on SNL, they pay more than that. So
I don't think so. I think
They
that's
don't usually say fuck though.
oh, they'll say like shit or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
one's
was
in-
just
well, very
Yeah.
recently, like
You
within
mean
the
all the
last
time.
year, Sam Rockwell was on there. He said fuck.
oh, that's what I was
think
thinking about.
Honest,
It was a
honest to God,
guest.
I
It
think it's
wasn't-
only like a $5,000 fine from
What?
the FCC if you
I'm
swear.
gonna look this up right
on-
now.
And it's different because SNL's not prime time.
True.
It's late night, and the rules are different. You can get away
Slightly
with more.
less lax.
Yeah,
Well, they're like PG-13.
yeah.
If you
So
can't-
one fuck before.
yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Any
Sam
form
Rockwell,
of,
you
too.
cool it for the rest of the evening, please.
Okay, this says you can be fined up to $325,000.
Oh, holy shit!
But up to. So like this guy, the NBA. Oh, that was the NBA, not the FCC. I don't care. Never mind. Sorry.
So
The
anyway,
325,000 is the FCC. The thing I was reading
Oh, okay.
was, I didn't realize until I started reading the article that it was the NBA, not the FCC. Never mind. Okay. Keep
So
going. I don't know why I care so much.
Anders Yoakum, the station spokesperson, told the Chicago Tribune, by the time our people began looking into what was going on, it was over. Copies of the hijackers telecast were obtained with the help of Doctor Who fans who were taping the episode. So that is the
you
only
gotta
fucking
love
love them.
Who's.
Yeah.
You gotta love
God.
the Whovians.
nerds
man.
have saved the world on so many occasions.
Dude, nerds save America all the
Yes.
time. Anonymous. Let's be
Thank you,
honest.
nerds. So that's the only reason that this signal intrusion exists still. Like, you can look at the video on YouTube only because some nerd in his mom's basement was taping Doctor Who that evening. Maybe his own basement, I don't know. So the incident made national headlines, and an FCC engineer said the hijackers could be facing a fine of $10,000 or a year in prison or both, like Mike said. The Chicago Tribune's November 24th article about the incident was entitled, "A Powerful Video Prankster Could Become Mac's Jail Room." I wanted to include that just because I love newspaper puns.
I'm
because
smelling the spinoff.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Mac's
Max
jail
Jail Room is his
It's,
evil
Yeah.
twin, and that's how he comes on the show.
And the
he
whole thing is just a Prison Break parody. It's Shawshank, but with artificial intelligence.
Of course.
Yeah.
evil robots. It's perfect.
So far, no one has ever come forward or been caught for the crime. Not long after the broadcast intrusion, WMAQ inserted clips of the hijacking into a sports highlights broadcast. So they then
Used it.
they hijacked their own signal to broadcast clips of it as a prank. Many viewers thought that it was real and that the hijacker had struck again, and they got all kinds of calls about it. So yeah, I did read something on Reddit a few years ago about this, and I couldn't find it again because it was posted like years ago, and somebody was like, I fucking know personally who did this. I'm pretty sure. Like, I don't actually have evidence, but all signs point to it being this person I know, and like they were like, you know, video editing nerds and like had all the equipment that they would have needed to use for it and everything. And I mean, OP followed up, and apparently it wasn't them. But they had said, like, you know, keep your eye on whatever channel. You know, maybe there's something big coming the next couple days.
Did anything happen?
Yeah, this.
Oh. Wow.
It was like 3 days prior.
Wow.
This person had been told by their friend, like, hey, you know, maybe watch this channel. Maybe you see something interesting.
Then they heard something else.
Yeah.
Then they're just the middleman.
Right.
Follow the clues.
Who knows?
Follow
Or
the
it was a
smack
coincidence
bottom.
and they had their own thing planned. And then they were like, shit! Damn it, Max Headroom!
Foiled again.
But so that's the story of the Max Headroom incident.
Nice.
If you know anything about what could have
Just
possibly
contact
gone
us
on-
anonymously. We won't tell on
if
you.
you are Max Headroom himself. We would
questions.
love to hear from Matt Frewer about this. So, but yeah, so that's my story. I guess we'll jump on over to Patrick
With the weather.
with the weather. So Patrick, what have you?
Okay,
other than
so
the
I've
weather,
got,
what have
I've
you
got
brought?
it. Imagine, if you will, America,
Okay.
and it's a beautiful day in 1880.
All right. Yeah, I guess when I
Wait,
said
in
the 80s.
1880?
Yeah, 1880s.
Okay.
So I picked the 1880s.
Okay.
He said the 80s. You
That
didn't
is true. I did
specify.
We
not-
got the
I did not
1980s.
specify.
We got the 1880s.
1880s. It's gonna be a good time.
Okay.
So anyway, it
Sure.
began the decade before, but it took full flight now. From Thomas Edison to Alexander Graham Bell, the nation was beginning to see light and sound transmitted across the nation.
Okay.
Bridges were built, lines were extended. The era of cowboys, outlaws, and Indians began to move in a different direction towards civility and, unfortunately, reservation.
You're really painting a picture here.
Yeah, no, it's actually really good writing.
Oh, it's not yours. It's
Oh
not your
no,
writing.
no, I didn't write that. Really give credit where credit is due. All of this is from AmericaBestHistory.com.
We have the best history. We have the most
I
history.
want to tell you right now. When I was researching this, I scrolled to the bottom just to see, like, obviously to see if they go all the way through,
Right.
and they do. They go through to July 7th. 1889.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else interesting happened from July 8th to December 31st, 1889.
All the way to July
Listen,
7th.
it was a boring year. We had one thing.
The only good
happen.
thing happened apparently was the Wall Street Journal had its first publication.
Well,
Yep.
you know, I mean,
So,
good for the Wall Street Journal.
right? On January 1st, 1880, the construction of the Panama Canal happened, and then jumping forward, the national population had reached 50,189,209 people. So that's
It's
pretty
not that
cool.
many.
Yeah.
Comparatively.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The geographic center of the U.S. was now mostly Cincinnati and
holy
like
shit.
Kentucky. Yeah.
Hey.
There was now more than 2 million people in New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, and Missouri. They have some images of the maps of such. On June 7th in 1880, the New York Town Column, now part of the Colonial National Historical Park in Virginia, is commissioned by the United States Congress. Its construction would commemorate the victory of American forces in the Revolutionary War. Sorry. Yep. Then, there was some stuff that happened.
Jumping forward.
President Garfield was elected on November 2nd in 1880. That was cool. Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell.
Our first cat president.
Oh, I'm not touching the Garfield news.
Oh, no. Are you think? Okay, never mind. It's fine.
Oh, boy, what have I done? On January 25th, 1881, Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell formed the Oriental Telephone Company, and thus capitalism over the control of voices began.
God bless us, everyone.
The American Red Cross named Clara Barton president in May 21st of 1881. She would hold that for 19 relief missions. The 20th president, Andrew Garfield, is shot, and he would die 2 months later on September 19th.
Do you want to hear a little more about that? Because
Yes.
there's a really good Dollop episode about it, and I'm like super obsessed.
Do it.
So the guy that shot him, certifiably like fucking insane. Okay, that's a whole story by itself. But when he was shot, that was actually a shot that he could have come back from, even if they had not taken the bullet out of him. But because it was the fucking 1880s, they were just sticking their dirty hands in there, and he died of infection after 2 months. One notable part of that is they had Alexander Graham Bell come in.
Yes, I make telephones.
Because he had just invented a
What do you
metal
know about
detector.
bullets.
Everything, obviously.
So he had just invented like a metal detector. So they were using it on Andrew Garfield to find the bullet. And after digging around in him, realized the metal detector was detecting the metal springs from the mattress he was on.
Yep.
I think it's here. No,
Nope,
I can't find it here.
Yeah.
Let's see.
But like, yeah.
It's really in there. It really just felt like it was just under the skin, really.
But yeah. So later doctors who studied it, like the whole incident, said that if they'd even just left the bullet in there, he would have lived. So literally doing nothing was better than what they did too.
Clearly the doctors were in on it.
Right.
Yeah, they were like,
We're killing Andrew Garfield.
that crazy motherfucker missed
or not
the
Andrew
shot.
Garfield. James
We
A.
gotta
Garfield.
fix this. We gotta finish the job for the crazy motherfucker that couldn't pull the trigger properly.
Right.
That's fair. Speaking of pulling triggers, on July 4th, 1881, the trigger was pulled on one of the greatest opportunities, which the Tuskegee Institute for Black Students Training to be Teachers opened under the tutelage of Booker T. Washington as an instructor in Tuskegee, Alabama.
I
So
thought
that's
that was
pretty
going
cool.
somewhere real different.
Well, listen, they were airmen, so they were pulling triggers like constantly, right?
I have no idea. But anyway.
Tuskegee turned out to
That's a part of Alabama, so I think that's just what that
but the
refers to.
Tuskegee Airmen
Yeah,
came out of that.
yeah, out of Alabama.
Sure.
And then in Alabama, the Institute for Black Students to like train to be teachers was a thing.
Okay.
Also, speaking of minority groups, Sioux Chief Sitting Bull leads the final group of his tribe, still fugitive from the reservation, and surrenders to the United States at Fort Bulworth, Montana. So, you know. The gunfight at the OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona happened on October 26, 1881. So, you know, cowboys, that's cool. Red Dead Redemption, that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Standard Oil Company Trust of John D. Rockefeller happened in 82, January 2nd. At the end of that month, future President Franklin Delano Roosevelt is born at his home in Hyde Park, New York. That's FDR, the New Deal.
Was born.
Yep. In 1882, the final bare-knuckle fight for the heavyweight championship is fought in Mississippi City on February 7th.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you're doing the 1880s. And I was just sitting here like, that's not fucking right, but I don't want to say anything. I'm probably wrong. I'm an idiot. But now I see. 1980s.
However, also, the practice of polygamy is outlawed on March 22nd, 1882, right?
That's when it was out. That's the
when it was
first
outlawed.
time that they were like, maybe this is a bad idea. The guy with like 2 mothers-in-law was like, I think we
Give
made
me a
terrible
break.
mistake.
Then also on April 3rd,
That was such a like
1882.
90s sitcom joke. That was so like.
Yeah,
Did you miss me?
that
With
joke was
every
brought to
shot.
you by Everybody Loves Raymond.
Jesse James is shot to death by Robert Ford on April 3rd, 1882.
The coward Robert Ford.
What?
There's more to
Shot him
this.
in the back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you shot him in the back.
So he's a coward.
I guess I just never heard that before.
Yeah.
The Pendleton
I know
Civil
one or two
Service
things about
reform.
history. This is a history podcast, so
Everything you know, you learned by researching for this podcast.
that's true.
The theatrical phenomena known as vaudeville started on February 28th, 1883. Also, the Brooklyn Bridge was opened on May 24th in 1883. 6 days later, though, a stampede of people fearing a rumor about its impending collapse causes 12 people to be killed.
Yep.
Yep. Oh no, it's going to collapse. We all need to run. And then literally 12 people were killed and the bridge was still standing. If anything, that proves engineering.
Right? What a great bridge, but what a bunch of shitty people.
Let's talk about another part. Now remember, this is America's best history. I love that these are included. October 15th, 1883, the U.S. Supreme Court finds part of the Civil Rights Act of 1875 unconstitutional, allowing individuals and corporations to discriminate based on race. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we want to ask, where did the hate come from? It's 1883.
That's where the hate came. That is the origin point.
There's just an example. The 5 time zones were made in November 18th, 1883.
Wait, before that it was all the same time all the time?
Or I think they tried to. I don't know.
What the fuck?
Do some research. I'm doing a broad strokes overview of the 1880s.
Wait, hold on. I have
in
more stuff
America.
to say. I hope you're okay with me just butting in.
Yes, please.
Because
always.
it just occurred to me the other day, while talking to somebody in Australia, that if she and I were born at the exact same time, I would be older than her.
Yeah.
Because most likely
15
it would be, she's 15 hours ahead of us. So usually when we talk, we're in different days.
Yeah, that's like time
Yeah.
travel.
And so
Isn't that
I
cool?
would be like a full day older than her,
Tell
even
me
if we were
what's
born at the
happening
exact same
tomorrow.
time.
It's today.
I do say that sometimes. I think it's so funny. I don't think she does, but she, she lets it. She goes with it.
Right.
I don't think she thinks it's that funny, though. I'm sorry. Please
No,
continue.
you are
Just
good.
time is very weird.
Time is a construct made by man to mark his inevitable march towards death. Anyway. Grover Cleveland was elected to president in 1884 on November 4th.
He's
That's-
from Ohio, right?
I think so.
Yeah, he's from Cleveland.
No, shut up.
The capstone.
Grover Cleveland of the Cleveland Clevelands.
Hold on, I'm Googling that. I don't know.
December 6, 1884, the capstone of 3,300 pounds is positioned atop the Washington Monument by the Corps of Engineers. The monument, 555 feet tall and now completed after nearly 37 years of work, would be dedicated in February 1885.
Grover Cleveland was from Caldwell, New Jersey.
Gotcha.
Not even from.
Oh, look, AT&T is made as a subsidiary of American Bell, which also I don't think exists anymore. March 3rd in 1885, the Statue of Liberty arrives in New York for the first time on June 17th. Whoop, whoop. President Ulysses S. Grant, Civil War hero of the Federal Forces, dies in Mount McGregor, New York in 1885 on July 23rd. The Rock Spring, Wyoming mining incident occurs when 150 white miners attack Chinese co-workers, killing 28 and forcing several hundred more to leave Rock Springs. Again, America best history.
It's 1880.
1880s.
Listen, we have the best history. But best is a relative term depending on what kind of history you like. And I like dumb history. So this is the best dumb history.
Hey, a riot happened on May 4th, 1886. We're over halfway through the decade. Hell yeah. The Haymarket riot and bombing occurs in Chicago, Illinois, 3 days after the start of a general strike in the United States that pushed for an 8-hour workday. This act would be followed by additional labor battles for that worker right favored by unions. Later this year, on December 8th, the American Federation of Labor was formed by 25 craft unions. So that's kind of cool. A pharmacist by the name of Dr. John Pemberton invents Coca-Cola
Nice.
on May 8th,
That's my
1886.
favorite bit. I love Coca-Cola.
I mean, anybody in 1886 also loved Coca-Cola. Do you want to know why?
True.
Because of all the cocaine in it.
Because they had cocaine in it. They just stick it in their nose, obviously. That's okay. Finally, on September 4th, 1886, at Fort Bowie in southeastern Arizona, Geronimo and his band of Apaches surrendered to the Brigadier General Nelson A. Miles. This signaled the end of warfare between the United States Army and Indian tribes, which is nice. Let's see here. 1887, Pearl Harbor was leased by the United States upon approval of the U.S. Senate on January 20th, 1887. The first Groundhog Day happened in 1887 in Pennsylvania on February 2nd.
Did he see a shadow?
He checking blah. It doesn't look like it was.
I
Doesn't
feel like
look
that's the
like
most important part of the Groundhog bit.
Well, I don't think
He
it
didn't see
says.
it yet. Oh.
I don't think it said. It doesn't say
he
if
saw
he
it,
did.
they would have included it.
Yeah.
So maybe he didn't see it.
What does that mean? What if they see it? It's 6 more weeks of winter, right?
It doesn't matter because it means that spring is 6 weeks away. Both of the options. If he sees his shadow, there's 6 more weeks of winter, and if he doesn't see his shadow, then spring is going to be in 6 weeks, or something like that.
It's really honestly that spring's coming early, or when we're gonna have more winter. It's the last 6 weeks of spring before spring, whether they're gonna be good weeks or they're gonna be bad weeks.
Oh, like
It's like the out with a lion, in with a lamb.
oh, I know. Okay.
Depending on whether or not it's cloudy that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I don't. Who came up? Wait, I don't know. I guess I have more questions about
Bill
that,
Murray
but
came up with it.
Hashtag traditions.
Emil Berliner patented the gramophone on November 8th, 1887. So the beginning of like music and recording and stuff like that, and playing stuff.
look what that culminated in.
Right.
Thanks, Spotify.
March 11th to 14th, 1888, the eastern section of the United States undergoes a great snowstorm, killing 400 people.
Yikes.
Lots of snow.
That
Which
is a lot.
That's a fuckload of snow. If
it killed 400 people. I mean, it's 1888, so, I mean...
Do we have cars then?
No.
We just got, like, the telephone.
Oh, okay.
And
Sorry, honestly, I zoned out for a
the
second.
motion picture camera. The
Real greedy there.
Hey, but
We
I was just
invented
like-
the motion picture camera before the automobile.
probably
Shit,
I
that's
wouldn't
the
say
fucking
it.
stupid thing I said this time. Can't keep my dumb mouth shut.
Yeah, it won't
Yeah.
be. It won't be the title.
That's
of the
true.
episode.
Oh, that's a good
But
point.
on October 8th, 1888, work begins on the first motion picture camera by Thomas Edison's laboratory. Also, side note, fuck Thomas Edison.
Right. Long live Nikolai Tesla.
Damn right. 1889, legislation signed by President Grover Cleveland sets aside the first public lands protecting prehistoric features at the Casa Grande ruin in Arizona Territory. These lands could not be settled or sold. Yay,
Nice.
protecting land.
So is that like national parks that were founded? Is that what that means?
No,
or-
he just protected the first public land. Protected.
Ah,
That's what it is.
okay.
We're just going to finish the 1989s here. March 23rd, Benjamin Harrison, he was our president, opens up Oklahoma lands to white settlement beginning April 22nd, when the first of 5 land runs into the Oklahoma land rush start. That's a weird sentence. More than 50,000 people waited at the starting line to race to 160-acre parcels. That's pretty cool. I don't know what land is, and that sounds like a lot of land. So 50,000 people raced to get land. That's what that was. They were like, we're going to do this. We're racing. Earn the gunshot and go.
Oh,
and
were
that's,
guns invented then?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Grover Cleveland was shot.
We invented the gun long before we invented a lot of
Anything.
things.
Right.
Cars.
Yeah.
And airplanes.
We were like, we don't need to get around. We just need to shoot shit.
The deadliest flood in American history occurs on May 31st, 1889, in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, when 2,200 people perished from the water of the South Fork Dam after heavy rains caused its destruction.
That's a lot of
June
people.
3rd, yeah, right? June 3rd, 1889, running between the Willamette Falls and Portland, Oregon, a long distance of 14 miles, the first long-distance electric power transmission line in the United States is completed. So that's kind of cool, like first power line for 14 miles.
Right.
So that's a big deal. And then obviously July 8th, 1889, the first issue of the Wall Street Journal is published. And then nothing interesting happens after that.
That's my birthday.
Good
Well,
thing we invented
yeah.
this newspaper. Well, I can't wait till
Andy was born on July 8th,
Yep.
1889.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
I'm
That's
very
it.
old.
That's all the best history of the 1880s.
In
Yes.
specifically the United States.
Yeah.
I'm sure a few other things happen.
The best history.
America, the 1880s.
Mm-hmm.
So what you got for us?
Yeah, what you got,
Fam.
Andy?
All right, I'm going to take you to July 14th, 1789.
God damn it!
So
Are
good.
you fucking? Did you guys plan this?
No,
Are
I
you-
did not.
I was not specific.
We're
when
just
I
interesting
said the
people.
80s.
We're just interesting people, or we troll way too hard.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, right.
Yeah, you can't have both of us on the podcast, so this is 2 bullshit stories.
They're not bullshit stories. That was a great story. I
I
was
mean,
just
they're
listing off
interesting, but they're
facts.
both just not what you wanted at all.
Listen, I only said the 80s so that way I could do the Max Headroom incident because I couldn't.
I fucking knew it.
I could not figure out
How to get that into an episode.
Fix it.
Radio. You could talk about pirated radio because
there's a TV broadcast though.
That's still a radio wave that was made on the television.
It was a TV wave.
Okay. All right.
I'm very funny.
I know that you guys are joking about something, but I don't know what it is.
Radio waves. There's no such thing as television waves. There's only radio waves.
Oh, I see what he was saying. Okay. No, I get it now. Okay, I get it.
I love how you have your microphone like you're a pop singer.
Like, I am a pop singer. No, I didn't want to lean over for the stand anymore.
Fair.
My back hurts. I know you told me several times how to hold it, and I was real nervous that I was holding it wrong, and I was like, Michael's about to yell at me. All right, so we're
so 1780 whatever.
Yeah, July 14th, 1789.
1789.
Yeah, we're in France.
Okay.
A few days prior.
FranceBestHistory.com.
I didn't. I got it from my good friends over at Wikipedia.
That's
Please
more credible
donate
than
to
mine.
them though, because they are getting real desperate.
Yeah.
It's that time of year, ladies and
Time of
gentlemen.
year. Please donate to Wikipedia.
Do your
You know, if everybody donated $1,
It was $3, which I did because I felt so bad, and then I was like, I probably could have donated more than $3, but they hit that number so hard.
If everybody donated $3, then the fundraiser would be over in an hour or something. So
I didn't read it that much. Just
we're not sponsored by Wikipedia.
every time they ask me, I just donate $3.
Just donate $3,
listen,
please.
Wikipedia can't sponsor us. They can't sponsor themselves.
It's like a sponsorship in spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Solidarity.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're a big reason why this podcast even happened. So, yeah. So we're in France. So I know I said July 14th, but it's because I wanted to really hit hard that date. Because that's when the cool thing happens. I do gotta take you back a few days prior.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Where okay, I don't know how to say this word. I'm gonna ask Patrick. It's Invalides. Let's say that with the French. Yeah. It's basically what it is veteran soldiers who are no longer suitable for service in the field. And so they... Okay.
And I can
like
say
an
it, but I have to... It's basically that. It's like the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, but for France.
Yeah. And so basically a bunch of them still work as like... I mean, they just can't be soldiers in the field, right? Sure. So they still protect shit. And so a few days prior to the 14th of July... they had decided to take a precautionary measure and transfer 250 barrels of gunpowder to the Bastille. Is that how you say that? To the Bastille? Okay, thank you.
And
like the band.
La Bastille.
Oh, thanks. For safer storage, right?
Bastille.
So that's important because then on the 14th of July, 1789, the third estate of France, which was under the control of the bourgeoisie militia of Paris.
Bouachi.
I'm not saying it like that.
Bouachi.
Listen, none of us are actually French. I'm sure the French will forgive us.
No, they won't. Isn't that their shtick? Which later became called the Revolutionary France's National Guard. So they stormed the place to get the gunpowder to start the. Oh, I gotcha. So basically, this was the start of the French Revolutionary War, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wasn't a war. It was just a revolution.
Oh, that's true. Right.
Yeah,
the French Revolution. It was not even a war. It was just a bunch of dudes hanging out.
Vive la France.
Yeah. Well, I was a little bit disappointed because all the cool shit happened after the 1780s.
It
happened in the 1790s.
When they started killing each other.
Yeah, I know.
They didn't agree with ideas.
So I couldn't even. Yeah. So it's whatever. Anyway, so for the list of people,
Is there some cool people that came from the Bastille?
No. So the list of the people there. It was under 1,000 people, actually. Yeah. So the full list has 954 names. What I think is really interesting, though, is that they were broke down by occupation, which I just that's an interesting way to code it.
So
that's a good point. Yeah. That's a really good point.
That was the big reason why
the
lawyers started.
And doctors, and then
here are the warriors.
Well, so
and
most
you have
of
the
them
baseball furies, and you have
so most of them were obviously local artisans, right? Like that makes sense. But then there were also some army deserters, and then there were
And all the
What I think is the
cake
most
makers and
Yeah, the most interesting category, there were actually 21 wine merchants.
Yeah.
Who just showed up, I guess.
No, I mean, think about it. Like, you're a wine person, and the queen or whatever is like, I love drinking wine. It is my favorite. Please bring me all of this wine that there is in this country. And that was
this a white wine?
yeah,
Take
that
it back.
was- exactly. And then you just get snubbed, and then you're like, fuck the French. I'm going to kick the monarchy. Fuck them.
Yeah, well, that's what's going on.
That's
people.
pretty much what happened.
So they arrive at the Bastille.
Like this.
In the
'Cause
morning.
they're winemakers.
Right. So this is not a visual medium.
Just describe it.
It was
Pretending
Wobbling.
like a drunk man.
Like a drunk bird. Because it was, yeah. Because they're winemakers.
Like this, silence, laughter.
I was hoping somebody would describe it.
So the crowd gathers outside of the Bastille in the morning, calling for surrender of the prison. So they were holding people prisoner in there as well. I think it was like 7 people. But that's important. They were also wanted the removal of the cannon and then the release of the arms and gunpowder that they were there for, which again had been moved there for protection.
The monarchy was like,
What if we just kept all of it in one central location?
Well, okay, so this
and lock it with a very sturdy lock.
well, they kept him in a prison. A prison is supposed to keep people out and in.
right. Well, so the thing is, it was it actually costs a lot of money to maintain people around the Bastille. So right before they made the decision to overrun it to get the gunpowder and arms, the monarchy made the decision to replace where it was being armed with just an open public space. So
It's the greatest idea I've ever heard. How are we going to cuss?
get rid of all the armed guards.
Just do it. They'll be fine. The prisoners aren't going to go anywhere. We're behind the door. It's locked. Where are they going to go? Also, the guns will be fine. Nobody even knows they're
It'll
here.
be okay.
It's just in a public courtyard. And
Psst, guy in the window. Psst, you want to start a revolution? What? All the guns are here. Yeah, and
just watch them. They put
they're
it in a
not
pile.
they're not even here watching us. You could just come right in. I think I'm gonna start a revolution. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
No, I thought that was pretty good. Okay, yeah. So they gather. 2 representatives from the crowd were invited in, and so they begin negotiations.
I don't know how those went.
I really feel like they're holding all the cards, though.
The negotiations, like how many people were outside of it? 995 or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, you 2 are going to go in there, and you're going to tell them that we want the guns, okay? All right, we're going. They're inside now. They're like, all right, what are your demands? What will make you go away? We want all of the guns. And they're like, no, you can't.
I see. I was not prepared for this.
Well, there is 995 of us.
Maybe we send in the other 993.
Well, actually, so around noon, one more person went in.
Negotiations
To back
were
them
that
up.
intense that they're
Listen,
just
what
staring
they
each
did,
other down.
They sent in the patsies. And then they were like, all right, now send in the negotiator.
If they show up first, they might get something.
They're just staring each other down. They're like,
This is really the straw that breaks the camel's back.
I'm going
Francois.
to write down the number.
Francois, get in here. Guy comes in, he's like,
Do we need to call in one more?
quoi?
They're gonna call them in one at a time.
Well, what about now?
Introducing.
What about now?
It's a
There's
brilliant
5 of them in there.
strategy called the line, okay? Where you can only shoot the person in the front of the line. So eventually,
Single file.
if it gets to the end of the line, that last person knows that the plan has failed and they can retreat to devise a better tactical solution.
They'll gather 950 more people.
Oh, God.
Thank you, Red versus Blue.
Anyway.
I'm never gonna get through this. I'm sorry, lost my place in my notes. Okay, so
The guy was sending at noon.
yeah, so at like noon. So the negotiations then lasted until about 1:30, when the crowd got too impatient. They threw the one person at a time thing out the window, and the crowd surged into the undefended public outer courtyard. Some people climbed onto the roof of a building next to the gate to the inner courtyard and broke the chains to the drawbridge, which actually killed one of the people in the crowd.
Well, 994.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is how many people jumped onto the roof?
Just a few.
Okay, so a group of assassins did this.
Yeah.
They made a game out of it.
They were double agents for the monarchy.
Was that like I'm imagining Assassin's Creed?
Yeah,
like
that's exactly
Is
what
that
I
what
was
you guys are
going with
talking
it.
about?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Unity.
Yes, I've been on a joke for once. Okay, so yes, so the drawbridge does kill one person. So some of the soldiers there started yelling at people to withdraw because somebody had just gotten killed. But in the noise,
So polite.
yeah. But in the confusion and like all the noise of almost 1,000 people trying to invade a small courtyard, these were
unguarded
misinterpreted as shouts to enter.
Well,
Yeah,
the
come
French-
on in.
The
Stop.
French
stop.
word for withdraw sounds so much like the French word for charge that
Right.
that's
Maybe
not
that's
true,
why
but
they
like
get a bad rap for surrendering. They think that they're
They
being
think
told
they're-
to surrender, but they're actually being told to charge.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's what it is.
Charge isn't like move.
Yes.
Yeah, no. So charge.
Don't
is,
ruin the joke, Patrick.
Ruin the joke, Patrick. I didn't get it.
Charge, which means, go, and then arrêter means stop. So
Hey, that sounds the same. They both
They
end in
have
te.
very similar endings.
Yeah.
Syllables, so.
kill me.
Well, if you were the one person on the drawbridge.
No. Oh.
So anyway, they stormed the
I'm sorry,
courtyard.
too soon. Too soon. for the joke.
It's really
Yeah, so they misinterpreted the sounds as encouragement to enter, except for when they did enter, gunfire began because a mob of 1,000 people were storming the inner courtyard,
Right.
which made the crowd feel as though they had been intentionally drawn into a trap. At which point the fighting became more violent and intense. This continued. So this part started at 1:30.
just thinking about all of this.
Yeah.
Continue.
How much of this accidentally happened?
Everything's just accidental. Like the way it's being told is that everything is accidental. Like it's no one's fault the French Revolution happened.
But it
if
did.
we had to give any blame, it's the people who stormed the Bastille.
No, it's
They
the guy
weren't
who yelled
listen-
charge.
They weren't listening, using their listening ears. They just didn't understand, and because they weren't being understood,
Did your
they were
guys'
being
like-
disrespectful. And
Did you guys'
obviously-
elementary school teachers ever tell you that the reason you have 2 ears and 1 mouth is to listen twice as much as you speak?
No,
Dude.
Yeah.
never heard that. That is great.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Yeah. That was probably the harshest thing a teacher ever said to me.
Right.
Before I was, like, a
shut
teenager.
your
That's the
apple.
most polite way to say shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Truly.
Yeah, but
So all this started at like roughly 1:30 p.m. So the firing continues. And then right after 3 p.m., the attackers were reinforced with
they got more guys.
they basically did. They got more guys. And then
They come in since
those
July.
guys came in with 2 cannons.
Oh, see, you bring a cannon to a musket fight.
Well, they
Clearly.
had cannons too. So
You
that
bring
was
to
part
a
of the
prison. They
Yeah, that was part of their
Oh, that's
demands.
right.
Yeah, that was part of their demands.
You
was
have
to-
cannons, now we have cannons.
we want all of your cannons.
But you have any
No.
cannons?
Fuck. Merd. Yeah.
We will use force and.
But
There
so
is
they
who's
brought
paying.
they brought 2 cannons.
Yeah, so they brought 2 cannons. Fighting continues. I'm gonna say this name wrong. Lanay, Launay,
Hang on.
Governor
that's
de
probably right.
Lanay. I'm not saying that right. I'm so sorry. He ordered a ceasefire at 5 p.m., which I feel like took fucking long enough. But at that
He
point, it
wanted
was
to
pretty
see where it went
obvious.
first.
Well, he did. It was pretty obvious at that point that both sides were just gonna lose everyone. That nobody was actually gonna win.
Wait, stop! I
Hold
told you
on.
to stop coming in, not come in.
No, stop, charge. He said.
Hold on, let's see where this goes. Anyway, go on.
So he wrote a letter offering his terms out to the crowd, which they refused,
Right. Sure.
obviously.
Can I please have these? No.
But
Shit.
so he realized that with like very limited stock, right? Because they were not prepared for this at all. So they did not have like enough food. They had almost no water supply. So his troops weren't going to be able to hold out any longer anyway. And so he opened the gates to the inner courtyard and let them into the fortress at 5:30.
Okay.
So at 5 o'clock, he was like, ceasefire, here are my demands. And they were like, no. And he was like, all right.
All right. Well, come on in.
So 98 attackers and then 1 defender of Bastille died during the fighting, which is like,
Including the guy that got crushed by the drawbridge.
you know, that is a good point. I hope he's included in that. But
That's
he died
still-
before
He'd
the
be the one.
fighting.
Yeah, that is true. He caused the fighting.
Yeah.
If it's anybody's fault, it's that guy.
Yes,
That's-
Bernard René Delaunay.
Yeah, it's still a solid KD.
It's the Marquis of
in favor
Lanay.
of the defenders.
Yeah. Well, and there weren't that many defenders either. So that's actually, I mean,
Sparsely
Significantly
They're also
less.
Professionally trained.
oh, that's
to
true.
defend.
So you're like,
Hey, do you want to start a revolution? There's no guards here.
there's
I haven't
10
seen one in like
people.
5 hours.
Okay, so so 98 attackers and 1 defender died. Delaunay was obviously captured, right?
Sure.
And he was
As you
dragged toward the Hotel de Ville, Ville.
You know, I could also just. Are you just on exactly what I think you're on, which is Wikipedia?
Fuck yeah.
So I literally.
It'd be, yeah.
I can just read
VA
along
no,
what you're
VA's
doing.
right.
Well, Ville, I think that's right.
Yeah.
How's it spelled?
VILLE.
VILLE. Yeah. Or. Oh, it's Ville.
Ville.
Or
Okay.
Hotel de Ville.
Yeah.
Hotel de Ville.
Okay.
Oh, Spanish.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So
They all have
so
weird, sometimes double L,
they
sometimes-
take him, they drag him to, I don't know, to that hotel. So outside they start talking about what they're going to do with him, but he's pretty badly beaten at this point and says, enough, let me die, and then kicks a guy in the groin to sort of incite it, which works. He was then stabbed repeatedly and killed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll do it.
Hotel de Ville.
Okay. So here's a quote by a doctor who was there and watched it happen. We perceived 2 bloody heads raised on pikes, which were said to be the heads of the Marquis de Lanay, governor of the Bastille, and Monsieur Flesses.
Yeah.
It was a chilling and Flessel. It was a chilling and horrid sight. We were shocked and disgusted at the scene. We retired immediately from the streets. Which is like, oh, obviously you did, but what a way to say that, you know?
It was very shocking. I went back inside.
Yeah.
I watched as these people
I
went down.
do not like this.
Dear
Wait, this guy was
diary.
British, though, so please.
Dear diary, today I was visiting my friends in Paris when one chap seemed to be carrying another chap's head on what appeared to be a very crude pike. This was both chilling and shocking in the very least. I went back inside and enjoyed the rest of my dinner.
I decided
Today was
to
very
brew
sad.
A nice pot of tea to take some of the edge off.
Today was a sad day. Anyway.
So 3 officers that were part of the permanent Bastille garrison were killed by the crowd. And so this all happened on the 14th. The king, Louis the 16th, did not learn about this until the next morning.
I seem to be down a defender.
Yeah.
Does anyone know where he is?
Where's the Marquis de Lanay? Where is he?
Yeah.
Where is he?
He was supposed to give me the morning report. He's not here.
So he was told about it the next morning by the Duke of La Rochefoucauld.
I'm just gonna read that for you.
Yep.
Duke La Rochefoucauld.
Okay. So Louis XVI asked, is this a revolt? And the Duke replied, no, sire, it is not a revolt. It's a revolution. Which
Is
he was
this
so
a
fucking
revolt?
right about. Imagine being, you know what I mean?
Is this a revolt? No, sir. It's a It's not a revolt, it's a revolution.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Oh, thank you.
It's over.
I'm so happy that you decided to correct my English. Excuse me.
I'm sorry. You want to argue semantics?
What's interesting is we are French, yet you are correcting my English.
So it probably wasn't that. Oh, well, no, I don't know.
It actually probably said in French, but
Right. Well, no, I know that.
Say
I just meant how. Yeah.
say
Correcting my English.
c'est une révolution. No.
So that was basically the catalyst for the French Revolution.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
So nothing. All the interesting stuff happened in the 1790s.
I feel like that was very interesting.
I mean, it gets better.
Sure. Well, yeah, because then Marie Antoinette gets captured. And, you know, we'll do an episode on the 90s, and then you can do.
I'll follow up.
America's Best, 1890. Don't tempt me, Frodo. Don't tempt me.
So, well, thank you guys for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks
It's been a good time.
for trolling my fucking show.
It's
Well,
not a troll.
don't
You
ask
said
me
the
to do it
80s.
That is true.
I did the 80s, just the 1880s. Gotta keep it. What a twist! Gotta keep it fresh.
So, listeners, you can follow us on the internet at AntiFictionCast. We're on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. You can also email us at antifictioncast@gmail.com. If you've got questions or comments or concerns
Or suggestions of people who want to be on the show.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
All the time.
Right. Yeah.
For a permanent
Oh, wait,
membership.
you mean you?
What?
Oh, what?
That's not my goal. That's
Vote
been
for
my goal.
Patrick.
Hashtag vote for me.
It can be vote for
Yeah,
me.
there we
Everybody
go.
will
It'll-
use
it'll
that.
be like the- it'll be
Everyone's
like
getting the
Mountain
vote.
Dew campaign where you vote for the new dew. Yeah.
Hashtag vote for me.
Democracy.
Hashtag vote for
Anyway,
me.
thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.